I'm Ashley Jarvis, and I'm the Community Cohesion and External Funding Manager for Southend-on-Sea Council. We had to work very, very quickly to put an application together, but that's not just something the council writes by itself. We had to bring all of our partners on board from the outset, and then we submitted and waited. We weren't successful when we initially submitted our project, but about 12 months later, Community Assets, which is actually administered by the Big Lottery Fund, phoned us up and said, sadly another project isn't going ahead, are you still able to go? At which point I thought, oh yes, and we said yes, absolutely, we're ready to go. We then had to put together a much more detailed business plan and wait another 6 months to get the all clear to go through to the third stage. Then we can stick a spade in the ground.
I'm Neil Pointer, for Project Manager for the Prittlewell Chapel. We produced a glorified feasibility study in some respects called Capital Delivery Plan. That took a normal feasibility study of how and what we would like to do to the building and what was suitable, and developed that to a next stage. We then pull that together and submit that to the funders. They then made the decision that we could proceed, and after that we then started developing that into a consultant's design brief. That design brief then forms the foundation for the architect of us communicating our desires for the project, what the key deliverables of the project would be. They then take all of that information and then start to develop the tender package and the tender drawings. Along with that, they also had to produce a lot of the planning application and the planning drawings as well. The documents that are produced are probably 1.5 inches thick. Everything that was almost designed into it was bespoke, using specialist trades, and had to be even more in-depth than possibly a normal new build would be.
My name's Rob Neobard, and I'm the architect for urbanology. First of all, we carry out a lot of preliminary investigation works. We carry out dimensional site surveys. We actually appointed an external company to carry out a thorough level survey of the site, a drainage survey. We attended site ourselves on a number of occasions, taking apart the building and understanding its construction, and we create a set of existing drawings that are detailed enough for us to move on with. It takes a considerable amount of time. We need to sit down and think about what it is we're being asked to do, the services that we need to provide, and obviously we need to do that competitively. But the ethos of this project was that we reconstructed the chapel as best as we could with existing and traditional techniques, but that we also included, as best we could, sustainable elements. So I think it was more about trying to set about the brief that was given to us, and that was that we were to recreate the chapel so externally it looked the same, but actually it functioned in a very kind of modern and contemporary way.
I'm Stuart Rust, Construction Director at Prittlewell Construction. The first stage would be us applying to be included on a tender list, and we have to demonstrate that we have the capacity and the capability of doing this type of work. The tendering process would take approximately a month. Within that process we would send out to obtain quotes from subcontractors, from merchants. When we submit our tender, we would also provide other documentation such as a programme, a method statement of how we would do the works, and all these items are taken into consideration by the employer to identify who gives the best value for money in terms of timescale, in terms of money, in terms of performance. Once we receive the tender, I would programme how we would do the work in the order we would do it in. We would do that in conjunction with Phil, the site manager, and the QS on this project was Dan Hawkins. Dan would then go through all the subcontractors' prices, analyse who was the most competitive. It'd be the same sort of process as the client has done with us. Well, the sustainable elements of the building, we had to introduce them early into our programme because some of them were in the ground. Other items needed design works to be carried out, which needs to be approved before we install them. Well, it's been a fantastic job to work on with the team, with Neil, with Rob, with Phil, our site manager, with Dan, the QS. It's really been a team effort to get to the stage we're at now, And I think the hard work that the carpenters, the stonemasons, the roofers, the bricklayers, everybody's shown is coming through, and the final product is going to be fantastic.
Terry Smith, and I'm a stonemason. I work for Pay Stonework. The building was, sort of vandalised, and stone was lying all over the floor. So it was a matter of finding what stones could be reused, and the heat from the fire that was in there has turned the bath stone, which is a sort of distinctive yellowy colour. It's turned it pink in there because of the heat from the fire. But it's still holding its shape, and it's still, tight enough to stay there for another 100 years, as long as nobody can set fire to it again. The Victorians get slated a lot, but they use the materials that were available at the time. And when the old boy dropped down dead, his son picked his tools up and carried on. Whether it's a new build or an old build, our work would have more or less been the same. We would have followed the line of the brickwork and put the stone back where it belongs. So, yeah, it doesn't really make a lot of difference, but I do prefer the old buildings because they have got more character than the concrete and glass blocks that have just got a bit of stone cladding
on. First step is to insulate a building thoroughly. If you took a square box, doesn't matter what size it is, it costs £200 to heat. No insulation, no anything. Just costs you £200 to heat that box. You can go and buy some photovoltaics to produce electricity, and buy some air source heat pumps, and then bolt on your green energy effectively. Your running costs for that building might drop to £100. You might be able to salvage that using your green energy. If you insulate that box first and then add on the PV and the air source heat pump, your running costs may drop down to £20. The insulation is the cheapest component to buy, but probably has the greatest effect on the energy efficiency.
My name's Mona Marnell and I'm a glass artist. The architect Rob Neobard, he saw my glass at Highlands and liked it and thought, rather than put in traditional stained glass, put in something contemporary. And I went down to Westborough School because the children there were doing a project on the chapel. The work was stunning, and what was intriguing was their thoughts behind the project, how they felt about how this chapel had been left to go to ruin. And from that I took various themes about colour and the way they used different shapes. To me, the idea of introducing the circles were to mimic the glass that had already been there, also as a motif that the children used, but also to me it brought the past and the future together, because in the past I saw those almost as representing the individual souls that people had forgotten about. What I had to do was come up with a number of designs that had to go to the architect and to the council, and they decided which one they wanted to go with. I wanted to bring harmony to the building. There's a lot of glass, there's two separate rooms, and I'd like to see the design flowing throughout it, uniting all the areas of the building.
Be an A rated with a number 12, which is way in advance of what most normal new buildings would be. They typically would be about a C rating, so we're about a third of what a new build would typically be. Footprint wise, we're a bit bigger than a domestic house. Energy wise, we're probably a minimum of a third if it was a new building, or maybe even as much as a fifth or even more than that of what a typical house would use. So very energy efficient in that respect. If a typical house was using, say, around £2,000 a year for their heating and their electric, we're probably going to have bills of about £200. Our original target was to become absolutely self-sufficient, but the practicalities of achieving that, we just couldn't quite get there. So yeah, it was a two-pronged attack. By joining up the two together, we then ended up with a situation where we've got a very good solution for the end user to have.
My name's Jean Lambert. I'm a Green Party member of the European Parliament for London. I think the more beacon projects you have, the more people come to understand that this is not something weird, only done by sort of very rich people, very strange people. This is something that works for everybody. I think some of the obstacles, particularly at the moment, are that people will think it's expensive. Well, in many ways it's more expensive not to do it, because this is money that you're going to be paying out year on year on year on year. And again, the more projects there are out there, the more this is taken up by local authorities, by government, etc., the easier it becomes, because then the advice is there all the way along, so you're not having to do all the research yourself. I think what's special about Build with CaRe is that, yes, it's a partnership that goes across borders. So you're picking up, the really good practice from other places, you're looking at what is already working somewhere else. So you're not having to start everything from scratch again. For me, the main aims of Build with CaRe are that buildings which are going to last, which don't waste energy, so they're not costing people a lot to really sort of heat the atmosphere. So this is really what it's about. How can you do things, the best use of resources, the least cost, and that are really good buildings to use?